Every startup has a hero's journey narrative that they tell about their founder. These narratives are almost always made up. If you're a startup founder and you're trying to come up with a good narrative that's going to underpin the strategy of your content marketing, choose an enemy.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Category Champions. Today we have a very special guest. He's Mike Taylor, the author of Marketing Memetics, How to Reverse Engineer Creativity to Drive Brand Performance. I read the book, it's amazing, you should get it. He also has the best data-driven marketing courses at VexPower, and he has hundreds of thousands of students through LinkedIn Learning. In the past, he's also built a 50-person performance marketing agency, and today we'll talk about the framework of Marketing Memetics. Mike is one of the leading experts in this. We will talk about it in two ways. First, we'll talk about it in a general day-to-day life, not related to business and marketing. And then we will apply it to how B2B companies can create their own category and share a story that creates a movement. It's a really good episode. It's 25 minutes to the point. So let's dive right in. So when we talk about marketing memetics, if we break it down to the single most core concept, it's the concept of the meme, right? And a meme is not just a funny picture from 4chan. Give us context on what we mean by memes.
Yeah, so the word meme actually predates the internet. So it was Richard Dawkins who coined the term in 1976. And it really just means any type of information that's copied from person to person. I don't know, this wallpaper is a meme, right? Like, because other people have this wallpaper. Probably most of them are dead now. I still need to update mine.
I think my grandfather used to have that wallpaper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A brand logo is a meme. The logo on the hat, right? All these different things are, they mean something because we have associated them with a brand or with a movement, with a culture, and memetics is really just the way of studying that. So the reason I found it useful is because I used to run an agency, Ladder. We were 50 people. We were doing thousands of tests every month. It was every year, and we were always testing different creative ideas. Different images, different text, like different copy, and I was trying to figure out like a good framework for doing that, because we were mostly data people and we were pretty uncomfortable with branding conversations. Right? We wanted hard numbers behind this, and we found that we were pretty good at testing, but we didn't know what to test half the time. And when we ran tests, we were testing. It was like something new every time. Sometimes it was small variations, sometimes it was big changes. But we didn't really have a good way of thinking about, how do we strategically learn about the problem space. So memetics was kind of that framework that I found. And it's, if you can kind of think about like the different images that you test, whether it's different types of copy that you test, they're all memes, and you can use memetics to basically kind of study what types of memes work best in your ads and which ones work worse, so you can avoid them.
I love that, because it doesn't just apply to like creatives we talk about ad copy and the creative image, but it applies to more of the things that we see on our daily life.
It changes the whole way you think about life,
right?
I walk in, how do you know that you're like in a country music bar, right? Like
the cowboy boots,
cowboy boots, jeans. The horns on the wall, and it's all, these are all memes. And now I'm finding myself, whenever I go to any place, like I'm traveling, I think about like, okay, what are the memes being used to decorate this place? What are the words that they use? Like, what are the sayings? Like, and what does that mean? And like, is that a clever use, or are they confused? Are they using the wrong memes? Because
I love it.
That's the real problem, is that if you're using the wrong memes, you're not using the memes from your category. People get very confused about what you are and like whether they should buy from you. Like anytime you make someone think, they have to like, it's friction, and they're probably not going to buy. So I think it's really key for any business, not just online marketers.
In the book, you talk about the framework of memetics, and you talk about meme mapping, meme jacking, and performance branding. Can we dive into each of those stages? We'll bring it back to B2B and category building in a few minutes. Yeah. But when we talk about the first step of the framework, right? Meme mapping, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so the first step is coming up with good ideas to test, right? So meme mapping is one way to do that. This is something that when you talk to people who are very creative, that's just kind of what they do. They don't do it very systematically like this, right? So an artist will go and build a mood board. Like if they're coming up with a new creative idea, they'll like go and look at what are the things that the audience likes, what are the places they play in, and what sorts of memes are they used to, right? And same thing with copy. I kind of, you would go and you would say like, what are the sorts of words that people use in customer reviews, things like this. So this is meme mapping. Meme mapping is just doing this on steroids, right? So
Right.
it's taking like every example from a category, and then more programmatically kind of tagging what memes come up. So an example I use in the book is if you're launching a new hotel in San Francisco, you can actually go, and I did this manually right for the book. You go through and you look at all, like say, like 100 of the top listings, and then you see what are the recurring things that they say in the copy. What are the recurring things that are like important in the listing? And you can also filter that by reviews. So like one of the things I found, which was incredibly surprising to me, and I've been to San Francisco a bunch of times and stayed in these hotels, right? I didn't really think about it. If the hotel talks about having a bar, it actually has worse reviews and like lower amounts of reviews, which means it had less bookings.
Interesting.
And I thought having a bar is a good thing, but actually having a bar and talking about it in the copy seems to position the hotel as like not suitable for San Francisco.
Right.
Whereas it's maybe too old school.
It's not the
Whereas
right
like
meme
a
for the
lot of the tech
context.
guys going there, they're not going to the bar, right? Like, and I found having a work desk was positively correlated to the success.
I love that.
And once you look at that, you spot the patterns that you otherwise wouldn't have seen. And I never even thought about advertising that you have a work desk in the room. I didn't think it was that interesting, but that's my biases, right? Like, and I'm not the representative person, the representative customer.
And there's a meme to context fit, right? Because that meme in Miami might fit in really good with the context, but in San
Exactly. In
Francisco, it's
Miami,
not.
it might be all about the bar, right? Like,
Right.
yeah, if you don't have a club in the basement,
Then
you're
we're
not
not,
getting
you
any
get less
guests, yeah.
reviews. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all contextual, and that's why it's important to match to the place you want to play in, right? So,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be Booking.com listings. It could be like a Reddit group that your customers hang out in. It could be they could look at the Facebook ad library. That's really great for meme mapping, right? Like, look at like what are your competitors using, and the key isn't not just to like copy what success looks like, but also spot opportunities where people aren't using things.
Right.
So like one of the things I found most interesting was companies who borrowed memes from other categories that their customers were familiar with. Monzo Bank is one of my favorite ones. In banking's very boring, right? Like if they wouldn't have a bright orange card if you're a banker with any of the big names. But Monzo was trying to appeal to students, and they noticed that like a lot of the students have like Nike shoes, bright orange Nike
Right.
shoes and stuff. They said, "Oh, why don't we just make it like this?" And they're like, "Yeah, fine, why not?" So they're borrowing memes from their customers are students. The students like those memes in other categories, so you can transplant them onto your category and stand out.
That's great. Let's bring meme mapping to B2B and category building,
Yeah.
right? Because one of the things you say in the book is there's no original story, right? And we're just talking about exposing yourself to our ideas.
Yeah,
When you're
nothing is original. Yeah.
yeah, when you're a B2B company, think about what your story as a brand is, right? And how do you expose yourself to other stories and to identify patterns across other categories, from Hollywood to other categories that you will see in the space, to build a framework for your own story?
Yeah, good question. So, one of the things I realized, and like I only kind of realized this as as I've got like now more than 10 years experience in marketing, but like I realized that a lot of the narratives keep coming back again and again, right? So, it goes through a cycle where some years marketing needs to be more data driven, and then some years marketing needs to be more creative. And like every single time, like people from either side shout at each other, and like some win the battle, some don't. But like we're still having conversations today in marketing around like attribution that like about incrementality, for example, that I was having like 10 years ago, right?
Right.
And so it's easy for me to have these conversations now because I already know all the talking points.
It's the
and I
second time you're
I
talking about it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So So like, and yeah, the things are a little bit different each time, but like these things come in cycles. These narrative, like another narrative is automation, right? Like machines are going to take our jobs, right? And that was it was a really big narrative around like the end of the First World War with that, right? And like another one, the Industrial Revolution, right? Like these things are not new. People have in especially in B2B, right? Like these industries come up in cycles, and that's where I feel like having a an experienced salesperson in your team that's been there, done that before, they've heard all these objections before, right? Like that's why they're so powerful, right? If you think about experience in sales, is really that person's done more meme mapping than anyone else, right? Like if they've had 10,000 conversations over 10 years, and they're gonna be able to. There's going to be very few things they haven't heard before, right? And they're going to know which arguments worked last time against that, right?
Right.
So I think that like that is really what explains the value of experience, in these categories.
I love that. One of the things that I know you did at Ladder was building a swipe file for
Yeah,
this new things you're
yeah, the
saying,
playbook. Yeah,
right?
that was
With the
that.
playbook.
Yeah, and again, we did this pre-memetics, right? Like before I had heard the term memetics, I was like, huh, it'd be kind of interesting and useful if we just keep track of all the tests we're running, right? And we consolidate them. So if we test the same thing multiple times, we put the results together, and it became our most popular thing on the blog, right? Like it was, I think, still 20% of the leads that they get at Ladder is from that, right? So it's a big database of 800 tactics that we've tested, and yeah, it's a collection of memes essentially, right?
I love it.
But yeah, we didn't call it that at the time, but that's what it turned out to be.
Yeah, when I saw it, and as I'm thinking about category creation and storytelling, if there's a swipe file for stories, right? Like the frameworks of each
Mm.
story, from the Lord of the Rings to Star Wars, and there's only like 7 or 8 stories
Yeah,
that you
the
can
hero,
really
the hero's journey
tell.
is like the
Hero
classic. Yeah,
Journey or
it's
Rags to
always.
Riches or the three
Yeah.
act, right? Like if you could do that and then use those memes for building your own story as a company, I think this can be really
Mm.
helpful for B2B brands as well.
Yeah, I think the most common one is the every startup has a hero's journey narrative that they tell about their founder,
Yep.
and actually when you dig into these narratives, they're almost always made up,
Right.
which is kind of interesting.
The
But
perception's reality, right?
yeah, exactly, or like at least modified slightly to fit the
Yeah.
template. But yeah, in general, the startup is always like so take it Star Wars, right? So the startup is always the rebel alliance, right? And
Yep.
and the big enemy is like the incumbent, right? That's the empire, and usually the empire is run by the emperor, right? Like someone evil. They have their henchmen, and every single successful startup story they've used that narrative, right? So Apple is the classic one, right? They talked about, they had actually even ran like the 1984 commercial where IBM was
Yep.
the evil empire, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's pretty common, and I would say that like that's a pretty good default, right? Like if you're a startup founder and you're trying to come up with a good narrative that's going to sell investors, that's going to it's going to underpin the strategy of your content marketing. Then choose an enemy, right? Like find who's your evil empire, right?
Yeah.
How do you paint yourself as the rebel alliance? So what can you do to help fit that narrative?
I love that.
And if you have that, then it makes everything else a lot easier.
Yeah, because these frameworks are just memes, right? After meme mapping, you talk about meme jacking. Can you tell us about what this part of the stage is?
Yeah, so Steve Jobs is a good example, right? Like he said, great artists, or good artists copy, great artists steal, right? And which is funny because he stole that from Picasso. And
Just to make a point.
I think
Just to
multiple
make a
people
point.
have said it. I don't even know if Picasso originated it. But yeah, so I think what's important is that you learn how to copy well. There's plagiarism, right, which nobody likes, copying exactly. If you transform, if you kind of take the essence of something, take a basket of the memes and transform it in some way, then you get all the benefits of like knowing that those memes were proven and worked in the past. And like those narratives have come back around again and again and again. Like it's you're fitting the hero's journey template, you're fitting those memes, but then you're changing a few elements to fit it to your story, right? So meme jacking is really that process for how do you, once you've analyzed the basket of memes that work, then how do you copy well and choose like what to copy and where to innovate. So that yeah, that's what I
Uh,
look at.
Tell me more about where's the line, right? Because between zigging and copying and zagging and kind of remixing,
Hmm.
especially for a B2B brand that has done meme mapping and has exposed themselves to all these frameworks and memes,
Yeah.
how do they jack those memes?
Yeah, so I would say the real sweet spot is um, let's say like 60% copying, 40% like innovating, right? And it depends on the category, it depends on the size of the brand, etc. But just in general, like you want to, like if you think about two sides, right? On this side, if you just copy everything 100%, you're not going to stand out. You're just going to look exactly like everyone else, and people hate plagiarism, right? So that's terrible. But if you're 100% original, like you're not even using the English language, right? You've made up your own language, like nobody's going to understand you and they're not going to be able to attach you to a frame of reference. So the answer is somewhere in the middle, right? And I would say that you can choose strategically what's important to you. So, Monzo Bank, the example we used earlier, they made the card a different color, but they kept the regulatory requirements the same, right? Because that's the thing you do want to copy,
Right.
like the KYC and all that, right? So, but the card is something that's easy for them to innovate on. It's something that competitors won't copy. Because it looks weird to them, right? Like they would piss off all their existing customers if they did that, right? So I would say kind of choose a few things strategically, and then copy everything else.
I love it. Yeah, because when we were talking about Steve Jobs before, right? When he came out with the iPhone still makes phone calls,
Yeah,
but he copied
exactly.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
and all the icons were skeuomorphic as well. So they were, like the calendar actually was like a little picture of a calendar, and
yes,
and
the TV was
like
actually
it's
YouTube was a TV. Yeah,
exactly because that's how we, like we make sense of new technology through
in references, right?
analogies to old technology. And then as we get used to the iPhone, then if you noticed, like everything's gone back to flat design, and that's another one of these kind of perennial narratives. Like whenever a new technology comes out, we always use skeuomorphs. Like memes taken from existing technology we know about. I think actually with AI, like the chat interface itself is a skeuomorph, right? Like if you think
Yeah,
about it, how do we talk to intelligences right now? We talk to them through text, and therefore that's how we access ChatGPT. But like I think that's a pretty poor interface, and eventually that will go away, and we'll use whatever the real interface ends up being.
right. Yeah, this cross pollination, right? I think when it comes down to B2B, where like if it's more software, like we're saying, there's still a few things you must have, and then you can
Hmm.
innovate from there, right? Or as you're saying about your story, there's a few things that the story needs to fit in within a framework, but that the framework can be remixed to make sure that it works for you.
Exactly, and that's what creative testing is, and that's like maybe a good lead on to performance branding, which
Yep,
is that
yep, that's where I
how
was
do you
going.
actually kind of test your
Yeah, yeah. Go
assumptions?
ahead.
Yeah, you have all these ideas, right? And maybe you're creating a new CRM, right? There are some things that you want to copy from Salesforce or HubSpot, and there are other things that you don't, right? Like you probably want to copy the fact that the data doesn't delete, right? Or it's secure. Maybe some of the interfaces of like how you do a data entry is important. But then there'll be other things you want to innovate on. So I don't know, maybe your CRM is the first CRM that's like built natively for AI, right? And they've layered AI onto their product with Einstein, but like if you can kind of build it so that AI always, like every time you download, every time you add a new contact, it fills in a lot of the forms for you using AI, right? Like that, just as an example.
Mhm.
You want to change certain things about the way it works based on that one innovation, but then you kind of want to keep everything else the same. But those are all assumptions, right? Like you're assuming that people want the text to be filled in by AI. But like maybe that's not even a powerful use case. Maybe it's actually the querying that's more important. Like maybe they want to be able to query the database with AI, and they want to say like, tell me everyone who's interested in baseball, right? So then you can take all your clients to a baseball game that are interested. So that's something you could do with AI. And if you're trying to choose between those two things, because you can only have one of them on the homepage at the top, right? And 80% of people seeing the website, we're only going to see the top of the homepage. Or if you're in an elevator, like, with the CEO who says they want a CRM, like, what do you pitch them? Do you pitch them the querying, or do you pitch them something else, right? Uh, Performance branding is really a case of testing those different concepts and then drilling down into them if they work. We worked with Booking.com on the B2B side. We were trying to get more travel managers to use it, right? And one of the ways we tested this, we found we were just testing a few different images. We found that, like, we didn't really think about this at the time, but we found in the data through meme mapping that that some of the images that were working really well were pictures of office furniture. We're like, what? Like, for travel? Like, no, travel, you show someone with a suitcase at the airport, right? That people were blind to that. People hated that. But and what we realized, so we've spotted the correlation. Then we went and talked to Booking.com, and they said, oh, it makes perfect sense. The people who we're selling to are not traveling themselves. Right. They're in the office, right? They're the travel managers. And I'm like, yeah, it makes sense now. So what you want to see is like a nice office. Like, as a travel manager, like, you want to be aspirational to work in a nice place. So anyway, so that correlation, like, it's still just an assumption. We don't know if the ad worked because of some other reason. So then we go and test it, right? And we actually did split test and proved that, one worked 14% better than the other, right? And I would say that whole process, I call it cascading significance. You start from, like, noticing an interesting correlation, and then then you go and prove it statistically. And obviously you can't, like, so when you're running a A/B test, you have limited budget in B2B, which is a real problem all the time. You can't reach statistical significance very easily. So first thing we did was test and see, does it have a statistically significant better click-through rate? And it did, right? So then we kept running the tests, and we expanded the test, put more budget, and then we tested, like, does it have a better cost per lead? And it did, right? But that took, another 3 weeks to test to get enough budget through the system. And then we're like, okay, but does it lead to better qualified leads, right? But that's, obviously, there's only one qualified lead for every 10 leads, right? So then that took 10 times longer to prove. So that's kind of the performance branding. It's like you start with assumptions that are sound based on correlations, and then you, like, kind of look at the data and find those correlations, and then you start to test, but you test, like, down the funnel, like, each stack. So I call that performance branding because again, I needed a way to brand it and explain it to people, but yeah, that's the general principle.
I love it, and it applies for a specific ad just as well as it applies to a story of the company, right? Like,
exactly, yeah. And the way you A/B test that typically is the founder will go and pitch it, like, to 100 VCs, and and then like, if you think about it, that's what you're doing. You're A/B testing, right? Like, you're pitching the story one way, pitching it another way, and you're seeing in real time, oh, like, when I said that word, their eyes really lit up. And I think that, being a data guy as well, like, I've gotten more relaxed over data as I've got more experience. You never have real data. You never have, like, a statistical test for everything, right? So I think it's perfectly valid to do these kind of small feedback loops and say, like, okay, well, I'm just going to iterate really quickly just by, every time I use a word and their eyes light up, that's a successful test,
point,
right?
Yeah.
And you can build on that, because then eventually you can prove it scientifically if you want to. But we're running a business, not a lab.
I love it. Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, we're really testing meme to context fit, right? Like we were talking about before. Is this cowboy boots appropriate to this cowboy bar in Alabama, right? Then if it is, then we're going to see signs of that. I know we're running close to the time, but I have a final question. You talk in the book about how memes are also from a science perspective, right? You talk about new entrants rarely outperform incumbents within the same category. Instead, they render the category itself obsolete. When we're talking about memes and evangelizing movement, right? Whether we're talking about Christianity with its own memes, or we're talking about storytelling for a B2B software company, do we think about creating a new category as a mutation of our memes or a virus? How do we turn this new category into a
Yeah.
virus?
Yeah. So Dawkins, when he described memes, because he was an outspoken atheist, right?
Yeah, I love. Yeah,
So
yeah,
he called religion a virus of the mind, right?
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
like it's a basket of memes for everything about it, very well optimized for spreading like a virus. And I think it's a bit of an unfair association, right? Like I definitely don't want to be as disrespectful to religion as
Yeah,
he
maybe
was.
let's not call it a
Yeah,
virus
but
on
yeah,
a podcast.
but I mean, it's he's right in terms of that you can use the tools that we use to measure the spread of a virus can be used. That's exactly how you measure memetics, right? Because that's how it spreads. Like word of mouth marketing is viral marketing. That's why we call it that, right? Because that's how it spreads. So yeah, I would say there are different tricks in there for optimizing optimizing a meme, right? Like if you have your story about your startup, your goal really is to optimize that meme so it spreads. Yeah, because the more word of mouth you get, like the less marketing you even have to pay for, right? So that's good for the business. I would say in general, like it has to be memorable because if it's not on the top of your mind, then that's less chances for the meme to spread, right? Like if you can think about it, like if a meme is forgotten, that's the same as dying, right?
Yep.
Because if nobody remembers it, then it doesn't exist anymore,
Yeah.
right? Memes live in your head. So if it's more memorable, then it lives for longer. And just like with genes, right? Like animals who live for longer have more chances to replicate, right? They have more chances to have babies, right?
Hmm.
And you kind of think about this in terms of the memes. So that's one way. The other way is kind of make it more catchy. So if I adapt a meme to a certain category, and there's a good analogy. So we talked about skeuomorphs, like skeuomorphic, like using the associations that people already are familiar with in order to improve the virality of a new product, right? Like that's the biggest kind of way to look at it. You say, okay, like there's one thing for the meme to be remembered and then people talk about it, but if nobody's listening, it's not going to spread,
Yeah.
right? So you need to adapt it so it has some of those old associations. And this is where we both have worked in the marketing mix modeling space with Recast, right? And like that's one of the things we talked about a lot was this is marketing mix modeling software, right? And you need to associate that right with like the current customers are people who want to buy marketing mix modeling software. So you have to understand what are the memes that those people think about and what are the objections they already have for the space. How can you counter those objections? So they spend a lot of time thinking about that because and every piece of friction is like one less person that
Yeah.
is going to remember the meme or accept it.
Yeah. Also, there's memes within like the larger movement, right? Like when we think about Christianity, we think about the cross and we think about
Yeah.
Jesus Christ himself, right?
Yeah, well, actually, that's a good example. You have the cross and you have the fish, right? You have the Jesus fish. Right?
Yeah.
And I'd never seen that in the UK. And then when I went into the States, they have it on bumper stickers, like the Jesus fish. And I'd never
Yeah.
seen that before. But these are competing memes, right? And some are going to be more viral than others. I think the cross probably is more viral just because it's like a more graphic image.
Yep.
And it reminds people of suffering. And like if they're suffering, then it's maybe a comfort for them. As well, so like you have to think about all the meaning and like that's why like one meme is going to work better than another.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. With for a story to make sense and for it to be memorable, you have to give them memes to associate it with, right? Like with Christianity, we have
Yeah.
the cross. With Star Wars, we can have the lightsabers, right? Like your story needs to have
Yeah,
memes for people to remember. But
exactly.
this
Yeah.
is fantastic. Mike, I know we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for being here. Obviously, people need to get the book that we talked about. We'll put the link below. Is there anything
Yeah,
else you want me to?
marketingmemetics.com. Yeah.
Love it. Is there anything else you want me to promote?
No, I think that's good. Yeah, if you want to chat, hammer_mt on Twitter. I have a Twitter addiction, so I'm always on there.
I love it. Perfect. Awesome, Mike. Appreciate you.
All right, take care. Bye.
Awesome.